United States President hosts President Buhari and 8 other African leaders. Expresses willingness to boost investment in Africa.
Federal government approves funds for payment of gratuities and other retirement benefits to ex-workers of defunct Nigerian Airways.
Nigeria signs treaty on prohibition of nuclear weapons at the United Nations.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we will revisit EU Economic Partnership Agreement EPA with ECOWAS nations.
Over the years, it's been a common practice for countries across the globe to sign one agreement or the other with different organizations or entities to aid regulating business transactions amongst them.
Well, it is in line with this that ECOWAS and Mauritania entered into a partnership agreement with the European Union on free trade, best referred to as the Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA.
Now, since the conclusion of the agreement in 2014, with about 13 West African countries also signed the agreement with 3 up-to-nows. They are Nigeria, Gambia, as well as Mauritania.
Yes, Blessing, you know too well that these 3 nations are yet to endorse the agreement in view of the fact that some aspects of the deal are counterproductive by their own rating.
Exactly. Well, okay. Nigeria raised their concerns over the issue in the issues in the Economic Partnership Agreement, which include, amongst other focus, common external tariff and the substantial opening up of the nation's market to the European Union.
Well, according to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, Nigeria may lose $1.3 trillion in revenues if it signs the EPA, as most industries cannot match the mass production capacity of European nations.
However, the European Union has continued to mount pressure on Nigeria to rectify the agreement as, according to the Union, it will enhance its diversification agenda and also deepen that regional integration and some other areas of interest to them.
But former president of Tanzania, Benjamin Mkapa, and other economic key players in Nigeria continue to advise the federal government against signing the document in its present form, as such agreements are not in line with the aspirations of African countries, essentially to boost local production.
Now, for proponents, as they continue to intensify pressure on the EPA, President Muhammadu Buhari, in a message to the 49th ordinary session of the ECOWAS in Dakar, Senegal, said the Nigeria government will consult widely before deciding on what the agreements should actually, or the terrain and the stride it's going to take with this agreement.
So, is the European Union ready to accept Nigeria's request for amendment of the document to accommodate her interests? Which areas should be amended to facilitate Nigeria's diversification agenda and industrial development? What should be done to avoid making Nigeria a dumping ground for finished goods in case the agreement is considered? These are some of the issues of our guests we'll be looking at, and of course bring answers as they analyze the EPA in relation to Nigeria. This is Good Morning Nigeria, and I am Cliff Ayoze. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the program.
My name is Blessing Abu. Thank you for joining us, and also welcome to today's edition. And as usual, we'll get to find out more things that will be coming your way in a companion segment. By the way, this is showing live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. And time now to kick off with the morning news, and here's Joseph Johnson, just back from a special program.
It's a special program.
It's a special program. You know, that comes a time in a man's life. He has to do what he has to do.
Essentially, when you have a honeymoon. So you're welcome back.
Good to have you back on the block.
Thank you, Blessing and Cleve. And welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari and 8 other African leaders were hosted to a lunch by President Donald Trump of the United States. At the event, President Trump expressed the U.S. government's willingness to boost U.S. investments in Africa to help create more job opportunities for the people.
For American firms, it's really become a place that they have to go, that they want to go. 6 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. Increasing American trade and investment across diverse industries, including agriculture, energy, transportation, healthcare, travel, and tourism, will further transform lives throughout the continent.
Nigeria has signed the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons at the United Nations, New York. This marks the first multilateral disarmament treaty endorsed in more than 2 decades. The Minister of Foreign Affairs signed on behalf of the country.
We're one of the main movers also of these treaties. It's just unfortunate that, of course, the countries that do have nuclear weapons, they view those nuclear weapons as deterrents and what really safeguards, they believe, their security. But we hope that at least the treaty will now be really a great effort by those countries that have signed.
The Presidential Ad Hoc Committee set up to reposition the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit and restore the nation's membership of Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Unit has submitted its report to the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo for further deliberations with President Muhammadu Buhari. Chairman of the committee, Senator Chukwuka Utazi, said the committee has done a thorough exercise and made recommendations which he said the committee was convinced would lead to lifting the suspension of Nigeria from the global body.
With the timeless handling of this issue by the presidency, in sync with the Senate of the Federal Republic that has passed this into law within 8 days, within the same July that we had that suspension, it shows that Nigeria is up and doing, and that the international community is following the processes Nigeria is doing to ensure that this suspension is lifted.
The Presidential Ad Hoc Committee on Financial Intelligence was set up by Vice President Osinbajo following the sanction on Nigeria by the Egmont Group of National Financial Intelligence Unit in July this year for allegedly flouting its rules and regulations. In the meantime, federal government has approved 450 billion naira for payment of gratuities and other retirement benefits to ex-workers of the defunct Nigerian Airways, with directive to the Finance Ministry to put machinery in place to effect payment. And Minister of Information and Culture calls on Nigerians to help government to maintain peace and security in Nigeria. These are fallouts from the Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo.
Being the rise of individuals or groups to seek self-determination. But this pursuit has to be undertaken and within the confines of the law, and it must be non-violent.
Contractors handling strategic roads in the country have assured Nigerians of quick intervention to tackle challenges caused by rains, which slow the pace of work at construction sites. This came up during an interaction between Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola, and contractors.
As we promised you, our first objective is to improve the travel time and your journey experience. The experience during 2016 Christmas movement was better than 2015. Our target is to make 2017 better than 2016.
Now, cases of long detention without trial will soon be a thing of the past, as the Nigeria Police Force has institutionalized Force Order 20 to address free legal services for arrested and detained persons in police custody. Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris says this is to further entrench rule of law and respect for human rights.
To offer them free legal representation. This will reduce, if not eliminate, the usual allegation of prolonged detentions, torture and extortion at police formations across the country.
It is a huge milestone that will foster effective pre-decongestion of Nigerian prisons and ultimately strengthen the country's criminal justice system.
It seeks to implement the constitutional promise of access to counsel in police stations in Nigeria.
Nigeria has been elected as co-chair of the Programming Commission of the African Union of Broadcasting. The election was held at the meeting of the African Union of Broadcasting in Libreville, Gabon, this Wednesday. NTA Executive Director News, Malam Mohamed Labo, who is representing the Nigerian broadcasting industry, presided over the committee after the election. And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll be back with Cliff and Blessing after the break. Stay with us.
From 1967 to 1970, Nigeria went through a horrifying civil war. It didn't matter who was wrong or right. Everybody suffered. Those who fought that war say it should never happen again.
So a lot of people will say, but you were leading the first one. Yes, I led the first one. I don't think a second one is necessary. We should have learned from that first one. Otherwise, the dead would have been to no avail. It would all have been in vain.
The words of our elders are full of wisdom.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Kehinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taiyi suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
Dettol team is visiting schools to teach children how to protect themselves from diseases. Do you know how we get illnesses like diarrhea, cough, and cold? No! They are spread through germs on your hands. Your hands collect germs that causes diseases. You pick up germs from any surface, like when you don't wash your hands after going to the toilet, while playing. And then you can get sick because of germs. That's why you need to fight germs to stay healthy by washing your hands regularly with Dettol soap to protect from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Wash, wash, wash your hands. What you have to do is wash, wash, wash your hands. With Dettol soap every day. Wash, wash, wash your hands.
Jennifer, don't tell me you're still looking for chapters for your expo.
What expo? I'm reading to pass.
Yeah, right. I beg, we all know even if you study, the surest way to graduate in this school is to do a rejo. Or better still, we hook the lecturers, Abby.
No, that's a thing of the past. I would not get a certificate I cannot defend. I would not be a burden to the nation or the society by fixing or buying certificates that does not add value to my life. This is the era of change, and change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
They love your house girl.
These girls out there gunning for Miss World. Who among them is as beautiful as you are?
They lure her out into a worse fate.
Free your mind, free, settle your mind.
They are only confident enough to woo house girls. They prowl like animals of prey. Sometimes they even get her to betray and lie against her oga or madam, or even harm the family she lives in. But what is their motive? Passion, love, affection, or keep a date with your rib-cracking comedy, Professor John Bull, this week in the episode titled House Girl Warrior.
Look at me. There's no space here anymore. If you're looking for your own wife, go elsewhere and find a wife.
Yeah. You was not hear what I am talking. I was not your wife's.
Yeah. Go.
Over and out.
Rogers, sir.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
Well, if you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria with focus on economic partnership agreement that is between EU and ECOWAS nations. But before we go to that, we'll go to business. And the federal government expresses commitment to repositioning the capital market for effective dispute resolution, and the Nigerian Stock Exchange records first gain for the week. Details with Leah Katum Babatunde.
The federal government has reconstituted the Investment and Securities Tribunal (IST) as a practical step towards restoring investors' confidence in the capital market and repositioning it to contribute positively to the country's economy. The Investment and Securities Tribunal was dissolved in compliance with the federal government's directive on dissolution of boards of parastatals, agencies, institutions, and government-owned companies conveyed in a circular dated 16 October 2015. The reconstitution and inauguration of the Investments and Securities Tribunal is expected to enhance its effectiveness and efficiency in handling the daily rising number of the new cases in the capital market. Inaugurating the reconstituted 10-man IST, the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, said the delay in reconstituting the tribunal was to enable the government carefully overhaul the system and ensure that credible, competent and experienced people are brought in to effect the desired change.
The alternative dispute resolution window is going to be rejuvenated by your appointment, and it will dispel both fears and threats from capital market operators and the investing public that require declaratory orders by the tribunal.
Speaking earlier, the Director of Home Finance Department in the Federal Ministry of Finance, Mrs. Olubunmi Shiombola, emphasized the importance of the tribunal in government's desire to take the capital market to higher heights. In his response, the chairman of the tribunal, Mr. Siaka Isaiah Idoko, appreciated the federal government for finding them worthy to be appointed into the tribunal and said the members will work tirelessly to justify the confidence reposed on them and reposition the capital market. The Nigerian Stock Exchange made a rebound Wednesday to record its first gain for the week. The all-share index rose by 1.04%. Next is a graphic summary. Moving on, oil prices rose on Wednesday after Iraq's oil minister said OPEC and other crude producers were considering extending or even deepening a supply cut to curb a global glut, while a report showed a smaller than expected increase in U.S. inventories. OPEC and producers, including Russia, have agreed to reduce output by about 1.8 million barrels per day until March 2018 in a bid to reduce global oil inventories and support prices. Iraqi Oil Minister Jabbar al-Luaibi told a news conference that some producers think the pact should be extended for 3 or 4 months. Others want an extension until the end of 2018, while some, including Ecuador and Iraq, think there should be another round of supply cuts. Nigeria and Libya are exempt from the deal to curb output, and the resulting boost to production has weighed on prices. This has prompted more talk about including Libya and Nigeria in the pact. And that is it from this end. Good Morning Nigeria will continue shortly. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much, Elia Katun Babatunde. Up next is a newspaper review.
Yes, now on our newspaper review, and of course our normal reviewer remains Bayo Atoyovi, and you are in the studio here. You're welcome.
Thank you, Cliff. Good to see you again. Good morning, Blessings. Good morning, Nigeria.
Well, talking about what the headlines are today in different newspapers, I think, Blessing, you have to kick start.
Okay, all right. I'll start off with the Nigerian Tribune. For the Tribune this morning, just below the nameplates, we have NNPC begins oil search in Sokoto Basin. You find that story on page 4. Lagos set up joint tactic squad to secure schools in riverine areas. Story trending on page 4 as well. Leading for the Nigerian Tribune this morning, court prescribes IPOB, labels it terrorist organization. Two writers to the story. Financial headquarters of IPOB is in France. This comes from federal government, and also says we have not a diplomatic issue over location of IPOB radio in London. More details on page 6 of Nigerian Tribune. The photograph you have there is that of President Donald Trump of United States. That's from left now. You have the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyama, and also President Muhammadu Buhari at the lunch in honor of select African heads of states hosted by President Trump at the sidelines of the 72nd session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York on Wednesday. Besides that, you have a story from Anambra State. PDP candidate picks Ekweme's daughter as running mate. For more details on page 35. And court dissolves Coach Onigbide's marriage. Land Use Act detrimental to mortgage financing. That's a story credited to the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, moving towards the foot of our page, we have a federal government approves 45 billion naira severance pay for ex-Nigeria Airways workers. Says no going back on airport concessioning. Page 10 will offer you more details. And beside that, you have a story from Ibadan. Olubadan sues Ajimobi, that's the governor of the state now, 23 orders over Ibadan chieftaincy review. Okay,
moving on now, we go to the leadership. And what is the leadership talking this morning? On the front page, we have FG traces IPOB's source of funding to France. Court affirms declaration of group as terrorist organization, with details on page 6 of leadership this morning. And we also have IGP moves to address illegal detention, launches Force Order 20. And of course, that write-up is there with more details on page 6. At the bottom of the leadership, we have NNPC begins search for oil in Sokoto Basin, with details on page 25. And the picture story there is showing us President Muhammadu Buhari with King of Jordan, King Abdullah II, during a bilateral meeting with the king on the sidelines of the 72nd session of United Nations General Assembly in New York yesterday. With them are the National Security Advisor Babagana Mungonu, and of course the Minister of Foreign Affairs Geoffrey Onyama. And also moving on the Daily Sun this morning, we have IPOB funded from France federal government. And of course, close to the nameplate of Daily Sun, we have Biafra. Agitators get ceasefire order. Southeast federal lawmakers sue for peace. Well, let's have you react to these stories before we go to other issues there. First trending is the IPOB story. IGP to address illegal detention. Yes,
the IPOB story is dominating all the papers, and nearly all the papers are giving prominence to two critical stories. One is the Abuja High Court that has granted an order prescribing the pro-separatist group, and the second was the information coming from the Minister of Information that the financial headquarters of IPOB is traced to France. Justice Adamuka Farati granted an ex-parte application filed by the Attorney General of the Federation. This application was said to have been approved by President Muhammadu Buhari before he left for the United Nations General Assembly. The other is that an order prescribing the existence of the respondent IPOB in any part of Nigeria, especially in the southeast and south-south regions of Nigeria, either in groups or as individual, by whatever names they are called. And the court also ordered that there should be a publishing of the same in official gazette, as well as 2 national dailies. The Attorney General of the Federation sought the proscription order based on the approval endorsed under the hand of the President before departing for Onga. Meanwhile, the Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, says the financing headquarters of the proscribed IPOB is France. The minister said yesterday that the group collects money from many people, both in the diaspora as well as in Nigeria. He also added that the United Kingdom government has refused to shut down Radio Biafra, citing freedom of expression as its excuse. In another trending on the social media, there has been a publication that IPOB was incorporated in 2014 in California as a private entity. That raises issues by lawyers who are saying that you cannot proscribe an entity that is not recognized in law as an entity. So this California registration shows that it is a registered entity. Ordinarily, they were arguing that it's not a registered entity in Nigeria. Meanwhile...
Well, we know that there are other entities internationally regarded as terrorist groups that may not have been registered. I don't know if Al-Qaeda was registered. But the important thing is the arms implications to the operations.
Yes, this raises challenges for all other agitating groups. Across the country, we have had OPC that bears arms, we have had militants that bear arms, we have had the insurgents that bear arms and held this country to ransom. There are other minor ones. You have the Sarasuka in Gombe and Bauchi area. You have Kalare. They also are groups that use threat among those, and also the arm-bearing headsmen who are fighting farmers, and farmers sometimes who also take up arms to fight herdsmen. All these are violent groups that needs to be taken very carefully.
Well, we still have some headlines on Delhi Sun. 22 airports up for grabs. Government says it can no longer sustain funding. With details of it on page 37 on the front page of Delhi Sun. And we also have Nigeria, 15 others signed treaty banning nuclear weapons. Details of that report on page 7. And of course, EFCC declares NSITF chair MD wanted. Of course, the luncheon, the special meeting we had here, President Muhammad Buhari, President Donald Trump of the United States, and others at the state luncheon of Select African Heads of State. But let's see what the Punch has this morning. You might want to take that. Okay.
No, but I have a blueprint to take. You can take a look at the Punch. Just below the nameplate for the blueprint, you have some stories. Serap to meet Saraki over lawmakers' pay. That's the restraint on page 7. Now, we don't want you. APC tells Sheriff. More details on page 7 as well. There is a sad one just below that. Kanu man stabs self. Jumps into well. Why did that? You wouldn't know. Then $1.6 billion loot. Court strikes out Desani's name. Trending on page 8 as well. And on page 9, Kano declares tomorrow public holiday for Islamic year. Well, being the first day of Muharram, that's the first month in the Islamic calendar, marking the Islamic New Year, 1439 after Hijrah. Well, let's move down to the foot of the page. Before that, you have the photograph of our president meeting with King of Jordan, as you have read in your paper, Cliff.
Yeah.
During a bilateral meeting between the two leaders. Now, just below the photograph, 2018, campaign now, go to jail. INEC warns Fayose and others. Trending on page 6. Buhari approves 45 billion naira for ex-Nigerian Airways workers. That story also was in other paper I read earlier. Okay. Now let's go to the
Punch. Was Punch offering us this morning on its headline? We'll have the picture story there because a lot of issues on the Punch. We'll say that court proscribes IPOB. Of course, we'll have it on the Punch this morning. Court proscribes IPOB. FJ says group gains funds from France. And how to track conversion of Google AdWords are there. And we also have 4 banks grading below minimum liquidity ratio, says Monetary Policy Committee members. And EFCC probes Akpabio's alleged 1.4 billion naira graft to banks. And of course, Zamfara has a story there that we need to talk about. Before then, time is not our friend. We have the earthquake there, but let's go to Bayo. Bayo, we have...
Quickly, apart from Kano has declared Friday as public holiday to mark the Muharram. Also declared Thursday as public holiday. This is because the lunar calendar has either 29 days or 30 days. But those are not the only calendars. The Hijrah calendar, the first day of Muharram is the New Year. Just like New Year, the January 1st is for the Gregorian calendar. There is also the Chinese calendar. Exactly. In the Chinese calendar, they have, in fact, in the normal year, they have 353 days or 356. In the leap year, they even have 13 months instead of 12 months. Okay. And if you reckon by their own year, their own new year is going to start on 16th of February 2018. And that will be the year 4,715.
A lot to do with date, time, and reckoning of
even Ethiopia has its own calendar too.
Some have their years, you know. Well, that's why we have to cap it up on our newspaper review this morning. We'd like to thank you very especially for always being there for us.
Thank you for having me.
This is Good Morning Nigeria. We'll be back in a moment. As our focus will center on the economic partnership agreement between the European Union and ECOWAS nations in a moment.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
Is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Kinde suffers from indigestion. His twin Taiyi suffers from heartburn. Sometimes it's the other way around, or both. That's why they use Gaviscon Double Action. It soothes within 3 minutes and lasts for up to 4 hours. For double relief from heartburn and indigestion, Gaviscon Double Action.
London, New York or Lagos, business or holiday, home or office. You can now carry out your tax transactions from anywhere in the world. You can now file all your tax returns, pay online, get a receipt and even process your tax clearance certificate from anywhere in the world online and in real time. All you need to do is log on to www.firs.gov.ng and click on e-services and be introduced to the world of innovation, convenience and transparency from the FIRS. You can also pay stamp duty as you register a new company with the CAC, or for other transactions that request stamp duty payment online. You can also file your withholding tax returns and determine the withholding tax deducted from you is in government coffers so that you can get your receipt within 45 days as long as the deduction has been remitted. Yes, all of this and more online at www.firs.gov.ng/e-services. FIRS, making tax administration as easy as ABC. Please note that all FIRS services are free of charge. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It pays to pay your tax.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The program is Good Morning Nigeria, and it is time now to kickstart our conversation. But before then, let's take a look at this background report. It is a tradition for countries to sign agreements with other nations or organizations with a view to boost their economies to this end. Now, the Economic Partnership Agreement between the ECOWAS and Mauritania and European Union on free trade was entered into. However, some countries are still declining to ratify the agreement. Let's find out why from our correspondent, Timothy Yusuf.
Adding a boost to every signed bilateral agreement the world over is the economic aspect of it, which is always geared towards improved business relations. In this direction, ECOWAS and Mauritania entered into partnership with the European Union (EU) on free trade agreement. Under the terms of the Economic Partnership Agreement, the European Union is to immediately offer the ECOWAS member states full access to its markets. In return, ECOWAS is to gradually open up 75% of its market with its 300 million consumers to the European Union over a 20-year period. Furthermore, the EU is expected to also offer a package valued at about 6.5 billion euros over a period of 5 years to help ECOWAS countries cushion the effects and cost of integrating into the global economy. 13 West African countries have so far signed the agreement, except 3. They are Nigeria, the Gambia, and Mauritania, who is though not a member of ECOWAS, but however approached the regional body to negotiate on her behalf. Nigeria raised concerns over 14 issues in the Economic Partnership Agreement, which include, among others, common external tariff and substantial opening up of the nation's markets to European Union. The hesitation on the part of these 3 nations who are yet to endorse the agreement is due to the fact that they viewed the initiative as counterproductive. According to them, Nigeria may lose $1.3 trillion in revenues if it signs the Economic Partnership Agreement. The European Union has, however, continued to mount pressure on Nigeria to ratify the agreement in line with the Union's stance, stressing that the initiative will enhance its diversification agenda and regional integration. Other economic key players have been warning the federal government against signing the document in the present form, as such agreements are not in line with the aspirations of African countries. As pressure continues to be mounted on Nigeria and other like minds in their decision not to hurriedly ratify the document, the question on the lips of many is whether or not the European Union is ready to accept Nigeria's request for amendment of the document to accommodate her interest. Which areas should be amended to facilitate Nigeria's diversification agenda and industrial development? What should be done to avoid making Nigeria a dumping ground for finished goods in case the agreement is considered? Answers shortly on Good Morning Nigeria.
Special thanks to Timothy there for that background report. And we now have some experts joining us for conversation on this. We are now being joined in the studio by Professor Ken Ife, consultant to ECOWAS and economic policy analyst. It's indeed our pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Also in the studio is Jonathan Aremu, a professor of international economics at the Covenant University and consultant to the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, on common investment market. It's indeed our pleasure to have you join us today.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll see you here in the Abuja studio, a familiar face too on Good Morning Nigeria. I'd like to welcome at this point Mr. Ken Okoha. He's the President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
And in our Lagos studio, we'd like to introduce Filippo Amato is the Chancellor, Head of Trade and Economic Section, EU Delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS. Mr. Amato, good morning to you, and thank you for joining us on the program. Okay, Cliff, we'll kickstart here.
Is indeed to have this formidable team of experts, very diverse in that. Let's kickstart this conversation. We know that West Africa is EU's largest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, EU is West Africa's biggest trading partner, on the other hand. But let's begin to understand what this economic partnership agreement is all about, for the interest of those who might not be in the picture.
Okay, no, EU and Africa, and even Caribbean ACP, we have been there historically. We have been their trading partner. It goes back to pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial era. And up until now, they have arbitrarily given us access, unfettered access to their market, free trade, quota free, and all that. But this approach were outlawed by WTO, as we all ascended to WTO, of course. And WTO now requires rule, and those start from the South Americans that we are complaining. The rule that the trade agreement has to be negotiated, it has to have some element of reciprocity, and it should not be discriminatory. So we will now have to go into, so all the Cotonou agreement, Lome 1, 2, 3, we're no longer on those boats. We now have to have a properly negotiated agreement. And ACP is one region, and then there are 5 regions in Africa. So we are now doing it on a regional basis. But the issues that come with that is that we have areas where we agree and areas where we don't agree. The EU, the Nigerian government, for let's say man says EPA in its current form is equal to deindustrialization of Nigeria. But the EU counters that by saying, look, we're only asking you to have 75% of your thing, of your tariff lines liberalized over 20 years. We are giving you 100% access to all our market. Some of those things you are worrying about, those goods, we are not competitive anyway. You still end up importing them from elsewhere. But the things that you need most to help you industrialize goods, equipment, and all that, you get it from day one when you enter the market. But then, when you look at some reality, is that there are 3 major macroeconomic modeling tools that have looked at these market offers. We have the World Bank TRIST, which is trade reform impacts simulation. We have the computable general equilibrium. We also have the T21 economic modeling that actually looks also at economic, social, and environmental impact. And I have to say to you that all 3 seem to be singing from the same hymn book, to the extent that, well, it could have impact, a lot more negative impact on our government revenue. It could have more impact on jobs, on the capacity, firms' competitiveness, on our export capacity. So there are all the, but they vary in their level of how hard it's going to hit us. So that is where we are. But we reckon also that there are some areas that are not even in the net yet, because if you look at trade and services, investment, Professor Ramu will tell you a lot more about that.
We'll
so
go
all
to
of
all
these
that.
areas that are not even in the picture.
You are going into area that you're escalating the discussion now. Let's just get the take of Professor Ramu here. You're a professor of international economics.
Yes.
And when we talk about economic partnership agreements, a whole lot come out. It should be a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And the Prof has just talked about 75% access to European market.
Yeah.
And I believe it's the same, European market access into West Africa. What is your take on these agreements? And when you look at one that is technologically advanced and the other side still trying to catch up?
That's a good one. You are talking about David and Goliath's kind of an agreement. But you see, let me just add a little bit to the background of the discussion. Karen has done a very wonderful justice. But what is economic integration? Why are we integrating? Economic integration has phases. From preferential trade agreement to free trade agreement to customs union to common market and then to economic union. It is the second stage, which is the free trade agreement, which EU wants us to actually have with them. And just as he said, we can no longer continue under the Lome 4 agreement because it's violating the most essential favor principles of World Trade Organization. And therefore, the Cotonou Agreement came up, and then the EPA inside the Cotonou Agreement actually specified that. That is well identified by him. But the real issue is this. In an economic integration, there's always what we call trade creation and trade diversion. What is trade creation? Trade creation means that if I lower my barrier to trade, and you lower your own, right? Then trade will flow easier between the two of us. That means what I'm buying from my sister over there, I will no longer buy from her. That one will lead to diversion of trade. And those are the concepts that affect Nigerians' position. What will be the implication of trade diversion and trade creation as a result of actually going into this agreement under a free trade area agreement with the European Union? That will mean certain things which we are buying somewhere, we have to be buying from Europe. What about if those things are cheaper? What about if that is not our priority? Secondly, what about if you may not be able to buy as much that we would have wanted to sell to them? And let me say this. When countries are going to economic integration, WTO put it as a matter of issue that substantial trade must be between you, so as not to affect other members of WTO. What do I mean by this? If I'm going to an agreement to give you preference and you are giving me preference, it shouldn't affect Madam too much negatively. That is the issue of substantiality in the reference article in WTO. That is, countries going into economic integration must have substantial oil trade. And that is the argument of European Union, that quite a lot of your trading will now be more. Now, if that trade have to be more, that means we are buying from you. That means you are going to flood our market. That means our industrial scheme and quite a lot of industrial incentives which are given to companies in Nigeria, we shall no longer be able to be there because your own good may be cheaper. And those are the issues which Manufacturers Association has actually been hammering upon. Let me say this before I stop. Economic integration is among the government institutions, but the practicality of this is between the economic actors. Therefore, we have to listen to economic actors of the integration process, because they are the final people that this thing is going to affect. Therefore, when they are talking, they know what they are talking about. More importantly, they know what has happened elsewhere. So I think that is what I can say. All right.
Thank you very much, Prof. Let's seek the views of the second Ken on set this morning. Ken Okoa is the President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Now, Prof just talked about other economic actors. You are one from one side, one angle of trade. Now, asymmetrical market access is what EU's agreement is trying to promise West Africa. How substantial is this for your members as well as other actors on the scene?
Thank you very much, Blessing. Good morning, Nigerians, once again. The fact of the EPA and market access is something that has been on the table for quite some time and debated very strongly. Now, I will come from the point of noting that a lot of people misconstrue the fact that some of the people talking against the EPA as it is for now do not want a relationship with the European Union. And that's a foul. That's far from that, far from the truth. Like my predecessors have said, Nigeria, Africa, Caribbean and Pacific countries have been in a relationship for a long time, and these have gone through decades. Right from the Yaoundé agreements to the Lomé 1, Lomé 2, 3, 4, and then the Cotonou agreement, which is the mother of the EPA agreement. And you'll find out that even the industrialization of Europe must be linked to Africa in terms of raw materials that were drawn from here. And where Africa, became the hewers of the woods for them and the fetchers of water for them. And they grew up. So now if you're talking about market access, the point we should look at is, in the European Union for now, they're a very strong market. What do we have to offer? Because there must be two sides of a coin. There must be a giver and a taker. And there are two sides to trade, import and export. Now, who becomes the holder of the short end of the rope? That's one. It tells you very clearly that you must look at the basket of our commodities. What do we produce that we can export to Europe? Apart from oil, that is mineral resources. What do we have in our manufacturing base? Secondly, look at Europe for now. Many of the companies in Europe are heading to the Asian tiger, relocating to China, where you have cheap labor and all of that. And they're producing from there and exporting to other countries. And our people, majority of our people, a larger percent of our market, at the last count we calculated about 71% of our markets now head towards that end. So what exactly would you be looking at in that
kind of agreement?
Thirdly is the fact that we have calculated trade is one agreement, but development should be another component of it. The EPA talks about a tripod objective. One is sustainable development, second is poverty reduction, and the third is regional integration. And therefore, you must not talk about market access without linking them, judging them with these tripod objectives of the EPA, which was noted clearly in Article 1 of the Cotonou Agreement. It is no longer an issue of market access, stricto sensu, but must be regulated, must be seen from the angle of development. What kind of development are you going to put on the table when you give your market to the extent of 75% as a country like Nigeria? What kind of protection are you going to give your industrial strategy to grow? China, for instance, we are seeing today, covered up themselves, shielded up themselves, protected themselves effectively before moving out, even towards becoming a member of the WTO. And they made sure they secured their territory.
And they did that for about 30 years.
And did that for long years.
79.
And they now came out, you now can see a strong China with a competent manufacturing sector. Today, we have industrial strategy. Must we kill that strategy with unwholesome influx of goods? Not only from Europe, but from other space. That's the point we're making. Thank you.
Yes, Okoha, you really made your point, that you talked about the three pillars of the EPA, and of course, the direction of trade towards Asia, rating to about 75%. And here we'll talk about the agreements and comparative advantage. We wanted to reach the EU representative who is in Lagos, but it appears we'll have... Okay, now we go to Lagos, actually. We understand that we have good signals there. We're talking to Filippo Amato, who is the Consular Head of Trade and Economic Section of EU Delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS. Well, the agreements, or ECOWAS agreement with EU is not the first that EU is undertaking, because we know these agreements have been there over the years with groups, African, Caribbean, and Pacific, and other continents, other nations, so to say. What really informed your interest in entering into this agreement, the Economic Partnership Agreement with ECOWAS nations, which we understand about 13 of those nations have ratified it, and the pressure on Nigeria to be part of it? What does Nigeria stand to benefit in that direction? Mr. Filippo.
Thank you. Good morning again. I think the discussion I've heard from the studios in Abuja already captured very well the reason why this agreement was negotiated and entered between the ECOWAS party, the West African region, and the European Union. First of all, it was a legal reason. Being all members of the WTO, it was no longer possible for the European Union to give a preferential and discriminatory treatment compared to other developing countries or least developed countries in the world to its former colonies, to the ACP countries. So we were clearly told by the WTO, there was a ruling that say that it was no longer possible to continue this kind of treatment, unilateral preferential access the European Union was given to the ACP countries. So we had to find another set of agreements, and this is what was agreed under the Cotonou agreements, to negotiate this regional economic partnership agreement with different blocks of the ACP countries, and West Africa being one of them. And the second reason why this has been negotiated, I've been repeating this many times, is that European Union has been present in Nigeria for 40 years. We celebrated last year the 40th anniversary of our presence of the EU delegation in Nigeria. We have been working here for over 40 years, mainly in the development cooperation area. So we are, European Union with its member states is one of the major donors in the world. And certainly the objective we had since we arrived, since we opened our offices here, was to provide support to create opportunities for job creation, sustainable development. And these three pillars that Mr. Kenukoa has just mentioned, and which are in the preamble of the agreement, are the objectives, the reason why the European Union has negotiated this agreement, to complement what it has been already doing for the last 40 years, to add an additional tool to the mere development cooperation, so giving with the traditional instrument of grants, where we work with the Nigerian government on a daily basis in the area of development cooperation. We needed to step to add an additional tool to the traditional development cooperation tool by to involve the private sector, to involve the economic operators, because in the end they are really those who drive the growth and the prosperity. And for this, a trade agreement, if it is well negotiated, and we believe that it has been well negotiated, can bring prosperity to West Africa. And of course, it has to be in the end a win-win situation. But I can tell you that due to the different level of development of the two blocks, of course, we have to take into account that we have to give more rights to the West African party and to take up much more obligation on our side. So the agreement is clearly unbalanced, but it is unbalanced in favor of the West African party because of this objective it wants to reach, to promote and sustain development and to be a complementary tool to what we have already been doing for the last 40 years.
With you, because you're talking about being unbalanced in favor of West Africa. And we know too well that in terms of sectors, West African exports to the EU still consist mainly of fuel, that's crude, and food products, while West Africa's imports from the EU nations consist of fuel, food products, machinery, chemicals, and pharmaceutical products. Looking at the state of affairs in ECOWAS nations, the technology, the power situation, how do you think they can measure up, in terms of benefiting from this very agreement? Because this has continued to be the fear of impacting negatively on the industries. Looking at the mass production capacity of EU nations as compared to what obtains in this region.
There is indeed an infrastructure problem. We all know the problem. It's actually the European Union. One of the main programs that is implemented for the next 5 years is to provide support to the power sector. We know the challenges of the local industry, and these were very well taken into account during the negotiation of the agreement, precisely to avoid that there might be undue competition, possible competition from European goods coming into the West Africa as a consequence of the agreement. The opening of the West African market for that reason is only for capital goods, intermediate goods, that for the time being West Africa is not producing and that local industry needs. Therefore, lifting or reducing, by the way, over a period of 20 years, those import duties, those custom duties from West Africa should not affect the local industry. On the other hand, where the local industry needs protection, the agreement gives protection, because for this 25% of tariff line which are excluded from liberalization on the West African party, all these are final consumer goods, all goods which where there is a very vibrant industry. Just to mention the food and beverage industry, all the agribusiness sector. That is where there is a lot of potential, and for which we clearly understood that there was a need of protecting those sectors, and these are excluded. On the other end, we are opening all the markets. Of course, I mean, to exports, all kind of export, not only oil exports, and that's precisely the purpose and the objective of the agreement, to provide opportunities. Currently, if Nigeria exports processed goods, it has to pay duties because we could no longer give free duty access to all goods. But the EPA would remove all these import duties into Europe for any processed goods. So you would be able to process goods and not only export raw materials, not only oil, you can export also other processed goods. It might be from the food and beverage industry, it might be the textile industry, and that's the whole point, is to provide an opportunity to diversify. This is what Nigeria, when I hear all the time the need of diversification, the economy is very well diversified. In the GDP, oil only accounts less than 10% in the last figures of the NBS, of the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. But where the problem is of diversification is precisely on the export side. When Europe is the main export destination of Nigeria, about 90% of the exports are oil and gas products, while only 10% is non-oil products. And this is what the EPA would like to support, diversification of exports, give the possibility by lifting duties to export more non-oil products. And this is where diversification has to take place. Of course, removing duties is not enough, and that is why development cooperation is, we support and complement this process. And we're actually already working with a program, the National Quality Infrastructure Program, to improve the standards and quality of Nigerian goods, so that when duties will be removed and the quality will be improved, lots of more opportunity of exporting non-oil products will be available.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mato. We'll come back to you in the course of the discussion. I'm sure some of the points you raised, your colleagues, panelists here too, will take a look at that. Let's get back to Professor Kenife. Now, he's raised some other valid points. Would it appear to be that there is an underestimation of some of those areas of agreement that we need to point out to actually channel what we're trying to do with the EPA in itself?
I only partially agree with what he says, because I think people should not misunderstand Nigeria. We want to do business with Europe. There's absolutely no question about that. Okay. We want to do it in a way and in the context of terms that are favorable to Nigeria. We are not equal partners. All our imports of the whole EPA into Europe is only 5%, whereas in terms of us, is overrepresented because it's over 50%. So then the big issue for us is what kind of agreement will factor our circumstances far more closely. We couldn't do it in this current form with West Africa because we differ. We differ. Our industrial structure is different. We account for about 80% of the manufacturing capacity in West Africa. And fundamentally, even though we are now locked down by the common external tariff of West Africa, so we don't have the space. We are locked down, and even though there are complaints and issues, there are several issues within this CET that we have been locked down. What are those core issues? I'm going to come to them because I'm going to the real argument now, and me and Ken will deal with that. So we need to be sure. Let me take one of the things he said into context. Our manufacturing capacity is going to suffer, so says the three macroeconomic modeling that I mentioned before. And in what context will they suffer? They'll suffer because we have poor infrastructure, ranging from no rail, the transport, power, all of that. So we have high cost production. Two, our market, even the market, the system says produce primary products for us in Europe, they process and then we'll be the buyer. That's what man says. We will just be the buyer of these products. For us to get to a point where our capacity, firm level competitiveness will play positively to improve our efforts is a million miles away. Now let's take agricultural produce, which at this very moment is what we can send to you. We have a challenge that within Europe, they're spending 75 billion euro subsidizing agriculture. And yet, this is our primary area of comparative advantage. We do not have competitive advantage in agriculture. And how do we compete with your agriculture when you are subsidizing it by 75%, $75 billion? Two, WTO requires you, under the SPS clauses, that you must be based, SPS, that is sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, must be based on sound scientific evidence. Is that not so? Okay. Right. When our crops come to you, You have what you call precautionary principles that allow you to, on any suspicion, it could be intelligence, whatever is suspicion, to stop that product and then apply due diligence. And then start. Now, what that means in effect is that our agricultural produce can arrive, and where is the source of this suspicion? One of the key sources of suspicion could be intelligence. It could be the customs selectivity channel. Now, the customs selectivity channel is going to look at a product coming in, and there are 4 ways where it could stop Nigerian product. It could say, well, the system says this country has a poor record of compliance. It will target you, red, it goes red. The second one, that particular product, be it cocoa or salt, has a poor record of compliance. It stops you, red flag. The third one is that the agent that is bringing this product has a poor record of compliance. It stops you, red. Or finally, the particular person sending this product has a poor record of compliance. So it's tough for Nigeria, for any of our products to enter. So what then happens is that when they now use the intelligence or customs selectivity channel to stop the good to examine it, you may wait for a week or 2 before the result come. By then, all your products are rotten. So you're dead. Dead on arrival. All the goods will have to go back. Or in fact, it's no longer about going back, because the EU Health and Safety Law is now in force from 2007, the 1999 Act. You are going to be charged to court. And the only defense that you have is called due diligence defense. Now, under due diligence defense, you have to show and demonstrate across the whole chain, vertical traceability, horizontal traceability. You have to demonstrate you have certificates of health, you have compliance. You have HACCP compliance if you are processing the goods. You have a ground level good agricultural practice compliance, where your certificate, where are the records if you've been transporting the goods under the cold chain, where are the temperature. All of those will have to be demonstrated, and we haven't got the quality infrastructure to be able to demonstrate all this all the way through from where it was picked up to when it arrived on the market. So these are the level of non-tariff barrier that you actually experience trying to move the goods.
Okay. Let's go to Prof now.
Thank you.
Because Professor Ken Ife has raised very cogent points. So did Filippo on his own side. We look at these non-tariff barriers, the EU and the health law. Of course, we know that the quality infrastructure project being also sponsored by EU will have a 12 million euro infrastructure project that will terminate by 2018, subject to renewal though, which is being championed by or driven by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Looking at all these issues, how do they impact on this agreement and Nigeria's quest for a review to get a more favorable terms of agreement?
Thank you very much. I think Nigeria needs to be given some sort of an option. And what is this option? We are just coming out with a new growth plan. At the new growth plan, we address quite a lot of these areas where we are deficient. Therefore, I think that if we allow ourselves to actually be committed, and the Nigerians are committed, this government appear committed to the growth plan, then let EU wait a little bit and then look at what we are doing. Then we can look at the agreement again. Let me say this, and my colleagues have said it. Nigeria and the rest of West Africa, we are not on the same economic development level. And the exponent of economic integration, that is Jacob Vienna in 1950, actually look at countries that are more or less at par. And therefore, Nigeria, because we are not on the same level, and World Bank, WTO, all of them recognize it by saying that in West Africa, we have least developed, we are developing. Therefore, for the EPA to actually group all of them together, and then this is it, it may be difficult. And that is the real problem. I think that the EU need to see what Nigeria is talking about. Nigeria is coming out with a growth plan that will allow it to be able to mainstream itself into a very good agreement within the global sector. So I'm thinking seriously that there is actually the need for other Nigeria to look at an option of having possibly a separate agreement. Because if the economy accounts for over 70 towards 80% of the economic activity in the region, you can match that economy with everybody. Why not destroy our integration, particularly the ECOWAS integration process? Now, there must be a way of working this one out. Working it out in this. Look at SADC. You see, South Africa have a different relationship with European Union. And therefore, when they come into their own EPA, South Africa went into the EPA with what they have with them, and they used that one to negotiate a better position to every country under the SADC.
All right, Professor Ramon, talking about negotiation, Mr. Okawa, I think you're part of the negotiating team, and looking at what Prof just indicated, our own growth plan, how does it tell you with what negotiations are on ground, and where are we at the point of negotiation?
Thank you very much. Honestly, during the phase of negotiations from 2002 to 2014, thereabout, when at the negotiation table, both here and in Brussels, both parties were doing all of this, there are a few questions that came up. And I could remember I raised one of them. And I asked, what is the volume of foreign direct investment that will come in courtesy of this agreement? Because, you know, one of the strategic components of our development plan is to attract
foreign direct
investment. Again, some organizations like the South Center in Geneva came up with an analysis that showed that it's almost zero flowing into Nigeria, courtesy of the agreement at the end of the day. Now, you look at the other components that are linked directly with our development strategy. We had our Vision 2020 then, and then we now have the economic growth and growth plan. Now, one resonating fact there is the issue of market access, which is exactly what is on the table on the negotiations. And what do I mean? When you look at the productivity volume of Nigeria, here we are now coming out of recession. What are the two key sectors that have brought Nigeria out of recession? Trade and manufacturing. And what does that tell you? It tells you that you don't have to touch those two sectors with any kid glue. You must be very careful treating them. And therefore, whatever kind of agreement that you want to engage in, without looking strictly on those two sectors, you are defiling the country, you are desecrating the country, you are reducing the country to nothing. The second point is this, and I want to commend the European Union. Quite frankly, the European Union has been of great assistance to Nigeria over the years in terms of trade, in terms of health, funding health sector, funding of education sector, funding on migration issues, which is an issue now that is on the table. That one might be here or there. I mean, then there are funds that are coming in now on competitiveness and also on trade facilitation. And that's why I said we need to be very careful over this agreement. Are we going to throw away the baby with the bathwater? The answer may be no. And that's why it is necessary for the European Union to also descend a bit, to open their eyes and find out, why is this baby crying? Why is Nigeria crying? Why is Nigeria knocking at the door? Are there things that could be considered? And I give you an instance. Look at Article 36, Paragraph 4 of the Cotonou Agreement. By the way, why am I referring to Cotonou Agreement? The Cotonou Agreement is the mother of the EPA. It was based on the Cotonou Agreement that the EPA was negotiated. Article 36, Paragraph 4 talks about alternatives. And I want to quote, he said, if there be any non-LDC that does not find itself comfortable in the EPA, that the Commission should find alternatives that will not keep them worse off in the negotiations. End of quote.
All right, Mr. Okawa, some of this discomfort that we're actually trying to push out. We'll find out more about them after this break. And there are reactions already from our viewers, so I'm sure you want to hear what they think of our discussion this morning. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll be right back after this break. The conversation on the EPA, ECOWAS, and EU. We'll be back.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
I was distressed to notice that some of the comments, especially in the social media, have crossed our national red lines by daring to question our collective existence as a nation. This is a step too far.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Another edition of TV Guide magazine is out with revealing accounts of trending stories. With the dwindling oil revenue, he says there is no reason to worry.
We strongly believe that culture is Nigerians' new oil, and we're going to show that by creating wealth, our art and culture will be a statement for all of us.
Our cover story is on Otumba Olusegun Munshowe, Director General, National Council for Arts and Culture. For upcoming TV presenters, Elegant Elizabeth Banu tells you what it takes. A peep into the activities of the Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative, a mandate being fulfilled. A trip to the Yankari Games Reserve and Safari in Bauchi State brings you closer to nature. And the Oshun Osogbo Festival, our culture, our pride. Professor Adiku, the Vice Chancellor, University of Abuja, tells us what it means to manage a university, plus our regular features, star profile, media issues, relationships, young minds, entertainment, sports, and lots more. Pick your copy now at the vendors or at every NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, still your indispensable companion.
It's about that time. States across the country coming together for one purpose, one goal. They are young, they are solution providers. The NTA ETV Children's Expo 2017, holding at the NTA Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja, with the theme Renewable Energy, Industrialization, Arts and Agriculture as tools to bring Nigeria out of economic recession, with sub-themes post-harvest processing and preservation, and using arts and crafts to promote tourism. Date 22nd to 27th October 2017. This expo is open to ages 6 to 12 years for junior category and 13 to 18 years for the senior category. It's about the Art, Science and Technology Expo. For sponsorship consideration, please call the following numbers.
Well, this is Good Morning Nigeria. If you're just joining us, our focus is on EU-ECOWAS Economic Partnership Agreement. And of course, viewers have been joining us through our Twitter handle, and we have here, Blessing will kickstart that, Dele Jackson Solomon telling us that separate EPAs among different groupings of African countries would only undermine Nigeria's wider integration efforts at the mercy of EU companies.
That's right. Festus Akimboye has this Twitter: government should put Nigeria first and resist any EU pressure to sign the economic partnership agreement if it concerns are not addressed.
And Sakiru writes that we should ignore anything that would not be to our advantage, either with EU or anyone. But then, is it not better to grow and have more experience from EU?
Jacob Chile says if Nigeria opens her market freely to European Union, they too should leave knowledge. They should leave knowledge in their technology open for copying.
And Clifford Agogasi writes that the value proposition and value expectation of ECOWAS from the EPA should not be cast in stone. It must be in dynamic review.
Sani Michael Omakoji's concerns are, some of us are already advocating for Africa exits, EU, like Brexit. After all, our togetherness over the years haven't yielded any result.
And Onwani Ulegede writes that European has nothing to offer ECOWAS under the EPA. They just want to dump goals announced and keep us down economically as usual.
MC EJ Live says this is obviously a diplomatic engagement. Both parties should weigh the benefits. Nigerians shouldn't be at the mercy spot though.
And Clifford again rising. To my mind, the question to ask is the EPA working? How well has it worked? How can it be strengthened to work optimally?
And another one from Dele Jack Solomon says that as it stands, Nigeria federal government made the right decision not to endorse the EPA. This is because the EPA's policy is unfair and only favors the EU. Well, these are some of the tweets that have come in. You could actually join us at NTA GMN is a Twitter handle as displayed on your screen. Now we get back to Mr. Mato in Lagos. I know you've been itching to say a whole lot of things. I haven't listened to the other guests here. Should EU feel dampened with the level at which this discussion is going over to be or not to be now? Would you be contemplating taking a look or acceding to Nigeria's request in these areas of concern to the nation?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say a few words of comments on some of the intervention I heard from the studio in Abuja. I'm a bit surprised to see a consultant of the ECOWAS Commission to put in doubt the genuine willingness of the European Union to support and cooperate with regional economic integration and with trade, what, as I said, we've been doing for the last 40 years. ECOWAS has negotiated and concluded an agreement with us because it is considered that all the requests that they put on the table were met, and actually the European Union has negotiated this by having always a good ear to the request from the West African party. Of course, this is a complex agreement, and undeniably, 15 member states of ECOWAS had to make their voice heard through the ECOWAS Commission during the negotiation, and it is not an easy process. But certainly, I also mentioned about I also heard the policy of subsidies to the agricultural sector. You probably know, Professor Kenife, that there is a clause in the EPA that clearly provides for a stop from the European Union of any subsidy which is distorting trade. So the policy that indeed in the past the European Union had to subsidize exports and also agricultural sector, this certainly has already stopped, and there is a clause in the EPA which provides for an obligation from the European Union to completely stop, in particular in its relation with West Africa. Then with respect to the status of the negotiation, this is a complex agreement indeed, and any discussion cannot be done on an individual basis. They have to be channeled through the ECOWAS Commission. That is probably what adds the complexity of this agreement. We, of course, always very happy to hear all the concerns, and we are listening, and we are engaging, and we try to understand what they are. But the complexity of the agreement is precisely that it has been negotiated between two economic blocs, and is not an individual agreement with each of the single countries of the West Africa region. So we're constantly listening to the concerns, but they have to be channeled through the proper channels, and they will be taken into account. The EPA is not an agreement set in stone. It is actually a very flexible agreement with a lot of clauses which allow its review on anything of its elements and components. There is an infant industry clause, which it is only in favor of West Africa. So if there is a need to protect certain industry, in addition to the protection which is already provided in the agreement, this clause can be triggered, can be invoked by the West African party, and therefore a number of sectors can be protected and duties can be again imposed on goods coming from Europe. There is a lot of flexibility, but as long as the agreement doesn't enter into force, this flexibility cannot be triggered either. So we are always very happy to listen to the concern, to discuss. We want indeed that this agreement is a win-win agreement. There is no offensive agenda from the European Union. As I said, it would make no sense that after 40 years we're trying to provide support to economic development, growth and prosperity. We try to undermine what we've been doing for 40 years with the trade agreement. This is clearly cannot be the objective of this agreement from the European point of view.
Well, still with you, a lot of issues have been raised, and this EPA has been lingering for some time. And you're aware that some of the commodities that were exported to EU nations were not given the access to market due to quality challenges, as alluded to by the EU nations. Some express fear that EU might have taken that decision not to allow these primary products into Europe due to Nigeria's inability to sign the EU ECOWAS economic agreement. And taking also into account the study on foreign direct investment, which in fact they say is nothing to write home about, in time that the agreement could attract to Nigeria and maybe the ECOWAS nations. What is your reaction to all this?
So, well, let me clarify that there is only one specific produce, the agricultural produce, which is dried beans, which is currently facing an import ban, which was adopted by the European Union 2 years ago, because in a period of over 2 years, it was observed that about 70 or more % of this specific product, consignments of these specific products to Europe, they were affected by a residual of a pesticide, which is dangerous for human health. By the way, dried beans represent less than 0.1% of the Nigerian non-oil export to Europe, so really an insignificant in terms of statistics and volumes percentage of exports from Nigeria to Europe. And it was for the protection of health of consumers that this ban had to be adopted to allow the Nigerian authorities to understand the origin of the problems and to correct it, not only, of course, for the benefit of continuing exporting, but also for the benefits of the Nigerian own consumers, because these goods, if they are bad for the European consumer, they are certainly bad also for the Nigerian consumer. So that is the only agricultural product that was banned, and there is nothing to do with the EPA signing or not of the EPA. It was simply based on a risk for the human health. That this product is currently suspended from imports. And by the way, our national quality infrastructure project, which I mentioned, was again mentioned by you and implemented by UNO, is supporting the Nigerian government into addressing this problem and to have this ban lifted as soon as possible. All the other products, they continue to be exported, and Europe is the main non-oil export destination of Nigerian goods. So there is no reason to believe that the goods are rejected or there is any protectionist approach or intent by the European authorities, and no fear to believe that we are being protectionist over Nigerian goods. We are doing the same checks that they would do with respect to any products coming from third countries. And if there is even within the European Union a problem that is represented for the health of the European consumers coming from one of the member states, we would even block the goods coming from member states if necessary. So there is no and there is no protectionist intent. It would just the only objective is to protect the health and safety of the consumers.
Thank you. Blessing. Let's really escalate this a lot more, because we know that we're not rejecting the agreement, so to say, but we say we fine-tune it to meet our interest. I think that is the position here. And I know in Cote d'Ivoire, a four-nation committee was set up when Nigeria initially said, no, we're not appending our signature to this. I know the Minister of Industry then, Olusegun Aganga, was at that meeting. And a whole lot happened there. What progress have we made since the setting up of that committee, that four-nation committee, to review Nigeria's position, look at Nigeria's position, and how best to harmonize it into the agreement? Ken.
All right. Quite frankly, I'm happy you just raised this matter because this has become a recurring decimal. At the level of Nigeria, we sat down at that point, and the technical committee came up with 10-point objections to certain issues that were put in the agreement, and raised some concerns as well. One of the concerns that we raised was, one, the issue of the pharmaceutical companies that are here dominant in Nigeria. What's going to be their future in the EPA negotiations and implementation, rather? Then the auto policy of Nigeria. And, subjects around processing. That's one. The second was the concern raised by the manufacturing sector as regards their capacity to compete. And of course, I made reference to Article 37, Paragraph 3 of the Cotonou Agreement, which talks about, which stated, and I quote, that the capacity of the private sector would be strengthened to assist them compete favorably within the EPA implementation. And I can tell you that's where I have my problems. That up to today, as we speak, I don't see any capacity of the private sector in Nigeria built over time. And here we have said we have concluded an agreement. If you are concluding an agreement, the capacity of the people who are going to implement the agreement are benefit or become the bond bearers are not built. It means you are leaving them to their tents. And that is not good. The third point is the issue of policy space. Now, if in this agreement, totally, you find that in the text of the agreement that almost in every strata of implementation, you discover joint committee, joint committee, joint committee. And that, I sat down and said, wait a minute. It means that whatever decision we're going to take regarding our own economy, we must bring it at the table of the joint committee. And that joint committee is ECOWAS and European Union. And then we have to discuss it and agree. How feasible is that? Supposing we have some issues that we want to take a decision on and then stop at that particular point, maybe tariff or non-tariff that we won't apply, technical barrier that we won't apply, which are acceptable within the WTO negotiation, WTO provisions. It means we just have to sit down and wait for the committee to, what is the, possibility of the committee accepting that for us to move ahead. The fourth is that today in West Africa, because
Nigeria will be a lone force,
that's
a lone voice.
You are just one vote.
Okay.
One vote. Now, the fourth is the issue of the text. When I reviewed the text as a trade lawyer, I discovered that today, as we speak, the EPA talks about regional integration. But that pillar, I am not saying it. Again, where you now have Ghana, as we speak today, has its own agreement, interim, been implemented. Cote d'Ivoire has its own interim, been implemented. That's two. Three is Nigeria has its own GSP. That's what we have been operating on since 2008.
So where's this regional integration?
That's what I'm asking now. That's the question I raised. And then the 13 or so LDCs, LDCs have EBA, everything but arm agreement. And if you come back again, you now see the EPA, that there are, fragmented portions here and there. But that does not mean we cannot sit down and sort out all these things. If our objections that we raised were taken into consideration by our West African partners, I'm not blaming the EU at this point, that would have given us a mileage in addressing the points and then maybe advancing to where we can say, okay, let's do a compromise. But those things were not technically dealt with. And I remember that the then minister, which you just mentioned, Aganga, we were together. He mentioned to me that, look, we need to come back with the technical people. We have to go back and look at solution to this. We get back again, and there was nothing that they...
Ken, that brings to mind, the role of other West African nations in trying to undermine the interest of Nigeria, ensuring that we don't have our way.
Of course, I mean, it's very clear that...
Professor Remu, do you think there is any play-up of that?
I don't want us to conclude on that note, that maybe other countries did not. I think let us go towards what he said. You see, one dangerous thing about agreement is the word, I break it to two, and then agree that then you cement what you agree upon. And immediately you agree on something, and then it's registered in WTO. If you violate it, it becomes an offense. Right? And that is why before we actually agree, we have to take care of everything so that we don't run into legal issues. Let me just refer to one thing. Simon Kuznets in 1962 came out with economic development theory in his 6 essays. What are the stages from primary to secondary, from secondary to tertiary? And then say the share in the GDP increases. And he just quoted that as a result of the growth plan which Nigeria is having, the manufacturing is trying to actually become a growth plan, which is the stage of economic growth. I still maintain the fact that let us look at this plan domestically first. If the plan will not actually synchronize into the EPA, let us make sure we look at it again without actually, dividing ECOWAS Commission. Let Nigeria bring out its own position. This is what we allow to sign the thing, and then we go ahead. European Union have been contributing to development, yes, but at the same time, they need to listen to the concern of the countries. These countries are not on the same economic development level. And then a jacket of equal size to everybody will not be okay. So, to my own, there's a flexibility, which is right inside the Cotonou Partnership Agreement, actually should be looked into again, because that thing is there, that it has to be flexible, particularly to developing countries, not to least developed countries that are still benefiting under Lumi 4. And this is it. And this has to come out of it. And just as I refer to what I referred to the other time, South Africa has a separate agreement with European Union before they actually conclude their EPA. Other people did not. And then they use that opportunity of South Africa agreement to agree on their EPA.
Professor, you're a consultant to ECOWAS on common investment markets.
Yes.
What do you people say to each other, or what do you say to them, looking at some of these areas that you've raised already, having all these pockets of agreements here and there?
Thank you.
Let's get a feel from Professor.
I think let me just say. You see, during the EPA negotiation, I worked on the thematic group on investment. And therefore, the basis was that, should we lock up investment in EPA? And then my position at that time is that I don't agree. Why? Because we don't have a common investment law policy. Therefore, what should we do? I said, our article, the ECOWAS Treaty, actually said that we should have a common position on the code. So let's work on the code, on a position on investment, before we now lock it in. And that's why they remove investment and services from EPA negotiation. And then we are working on that one. It's not in the EPA. It's not in trading in goods. So we are not negotiating investment with trading in goods. So that's why it was separated. And then we are working on it. And that is where I'm a consultant of ECOWAS Common Investment Market to have a common position before we can use to negotiate. So I believe we can get a comfortable position on every economic activity.
Okay.
I just like to make something clear that I don't think any of us here is speaking for ECOWAS. We're speaking for ourselves, and particularly as Nigerians. And Nigeria that wants this business to happen between Nigeria and Europe. We're looking for the conduit. We're looking for the ways and means for this to happen.
Entry point.
And I don't think that Nigeria should be treated any different from South Africa. Nigeria is the biggest economy in Africa, the largest population in Africa. Manufacturing sector is the core of our economy. And when we have our own trade and development cooperation agreement with EU, just like South Africa, it allows us to deal with the intractable problems that we have seen with this document. It allows us to factor in the investment aspect, bring in ICT, bring in health, bring in education, bring in all of that, and then move forward in a way that is comfortable for Nigeria to be a big player and continue to be a big player, rather than going to undermine the position of other members of ECOWAS and then put ourselves on a firing line with our own manufacturing base. You know, I don't think there's any reason why we should not merit a same agreement, the same treatment as South Africa.
Professor Kenife, Nigeria does not need EPA now. That is the position from the look of things.
I'm not saying that.
We are not ready for the agreement.
In fact, let me connect with what Ken has said. It is only on the 25% of the items that are not subject to liberalization over the next 20 years. That's where we have recourse to trade defense mechanism, where we have recourse to infant protection and all of that. But within the 75% tariff lines, we're in trouble. We have lost the policy space because we are just a minority in 15 member states. Whatever, if any of our tariff lines comes under attack, we can do anything.
Okay, Ken.
Because you must go to the Joint Implementation Committee to have a say, have it approved before it goes forward. So, and we have a lockdown. We have a tariff lockdown with CET. So we don't have that policy space.
Okay, Professor Ken, if you've just made a very valid point there. I think we'd like Filippo to come in. This whole lot of fears, the need for EU to review its position, treat Nigeria as the biggest economy in Africa, and concede to us those things that are of interest to us that will boost job creation, wealth, and diversification of our economy. You did point out to some things, and there have been infrastructural challenges, that have been put on the table that could be a hindrance to our realizing this. And the export of primary products. Why can't the European Union bring in the industries to process those products, those primary products in Nigeria, as a way of helping Nigeria to develop its industries and, of course, buy into the EU technology? And, of course, looking at these concerns, is it not possible to have EU-Nigeria economic agreement? Filippo?
Yeah, sure. Yes, you have raised a lot of issues. Let me try to address one by one. First of all, the last thing you mentioned about how to improve the processing of goods, the processing industry, and to allow more processed products to be exported to the EU rather than just raw materials or raw agricultural products. That's precisely the purpose of the EPA. Currently, when Nigeria is exporting raw materials, most of them, certainly oil, but also some other agricultural raw materials, they enter duty-free to Europe. But if you try to process them, they face duties. And that is precisely by removing all import duties that an additional opportunity to export processed goods, and therefore to boost export of and the manufacturing industry, not only to serve the local consumer, but also potentially the European market would arise. So that is what the EPA is offering in terms of market access liberalization in Europe. To the observation, to the point raised by Professor Kenife that Nigeria should be given the same treatment of South Africa, well, I would like him to point me to what part of the EPA, which, by the way, South Africa has signed together with other countries in the SADC region. South Africa last year has signed an EPA with the European Union. I do not think that they have received a better treatment than West Africa. On the contrary, if you look well at the agreement, the treatment we're giving to West Africa is much better. Then the issue of regional economic integration. Well, the EPA would like to build and to improve and to foster regional economic integration. It is one of the three pillars that Ken Ukoa has mentioned before. And it is precisely by signing a trade agreement, the all-regional bloc with the European Union, that beside the CET, the Common External Tariff, which is already a first step of a common commercial policy of West Africa, by signing a trade agreement, all the region with the European Union, this would be an additional step towards having a real common commercial policy. When the European Union, when European Union negotiates agreements, it does it on behalf of all the 28 8 European member states. It's the European Commission which negotiates trade agreements with the rest of the world. It's not a single member state. And actually that is what makes the European Common Commercial Policy. So this would be actually a step forward in that direction. It would replace indeed this situation of fragmentation, which is inimical to regional economic integration, whereby there are, for the time being, 4 different trade regimes of West African countries with the European Union. We have GSP for Nigeria, GSP Plus for Cape Verde. We have 2 interim agreements from Ghana and Ivory Coast with the European Union. We have LDC countries, all the other countries within West Africa, which have everything but access to the European Union. So these are 4 or 5 different regimes. And they would be replaced by one single trade regime, which is the EPA. So this would foster regional economic integration. This would create a common commercial policy. If Nigeria starts going its own way and negotiate its own trade agreements, this would, in my view, totally undermine and possibly destroy any attempt to build a common commercial policy. So Nigeria has to make a choice, and Nigeria has the possibility to actually drive regional economic integration, being the economic engine, being the biggest country, having the biggest GDP, the strongest manufacturing. Does it want to lead regional economic integration, or does it want to destroy it? That's a fundamental question that the Nigerians have to ask.
Well, thank you very much, Filippo, for that contribution. We'll move on now. Nigerians have been reacting to this very conversation. It's in fact, I've got a lot of interest from Nigerians, and they're reacting through the Twitter handle of NTA GMN. And now going straight to their reactions, we have O.O. Nelson saying, Nigeria can't afford to disrupt the current economic growth plans. Our diversifying plan will be greatly affected by this agreement. Blessing?
Yes, from Onwai Ulegede, he's just tweet. They are too desperate for this partnership. They have even sponsored debates where they paid participants in hard currency. It's a no-no. Well, we can't substantiate that. Okay.
Clifford Aguegosi writes that, to what extent has the reasons given by Nigeria for why it has not signed the agreement been addressed?
Great question. Well, from Sakiru, negotiation with EU on economic partnership will be a slave to them.
Yakubu Mbala says, kudos, profs. Negotiate so that our interest will be articulated. Otherwise, our local manufacturers, a lot of question mark.
Jacob Chile has the tweet. Conduct of international economic relations has prohibited access to knowledge in European technologies. Nigeria must be cautious.
Dio Isaac Ojedero writes that whatever the terms of the partnership, it's important that the Nigerian government acts in ensuring it is to the benefit and advantage of citizens.
Now for Omogbola Babs, it says, how exhaustive has the ECOWAS leadership looked at the reasons that led to Brexit? Nigeria, and by extension, the ECOWAS must be very careful.
And from Friday Eustace, it says, what suggestion did the EU give to curtail the pesticides in that specific dry beans? Now we're home stretch. Just briefly, just give us one second of your take on the way forward.
Second is
my take on this is that, one, Nigeria should trigger a reconsideration. Some people have said renegotiation, a reconsideration of the agreement. Secondly, there are options that are available. The GSP Plus, for instance. Nigeria has been able to ratify the 27 international conventions that are prerequisite for this. Can we have that? Thirdly, Nigeria should also become man enough to put down on the table, and I'm talking to Nigeria now, put down on the table what it wants as positions, and then drift it, push it towards ECOWAS so that could be done. Finally, please.
You said for the 4 of them now.
Yeah, finally. There's an appeal here. We need to be consistent with our positions. We are negotiating the CFTA.
We need to be consistent with our positions. Harimu, 1 second.
Thank you. 1 second given to me. South Africa has trade cooperation agreement before they negotiated their own EPA. We do not have that option. Now, because we are now finalizing let us see whether we can still have opportunity to do that without disrupting the ECOWAS community.
Professor Kenife.
Yeah, I agree with that. But also need to say that all the growth plans for Nigeria predictions that in the 2050 we'll have 6.4 trillion GDP. All of them are predicated on actually working within ECOWAS and trading effectively with Europe. So we want to do the business.
Okay. Professor Ken Ife, consultant to ECOWAS and economic policy analyst, we say special thanks to you. Professor of International Economics at the Covenant University and consultant to ECOWAS on Common Investment Market. Jonathan Aremo, we thank you so much.
Thank you.
And of course, we have Ken Okoha, President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. We thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And to Filippo, in Lagos, we'd like to have your final take on the way forward.
Yes, I just want to, my last remark, say that we are not putting the European Union certainly pressure on Nigeria to sign the agreement. We are not under pressure and we don't want to put any pressure. It is just frustrating to see this debate going on for years and years and nothing happening. So I invite all stakeholders to provide any suggestion to move forward because we are very open to dialogue. But I mean, I've just been here for 3 years. I hear these debates going on, but nothing happens. Thank you.
Amato, Consular, Head of Trade and Economic Section, EU Delegation to Nigeria and ECOWAS. I'm sure Nigeria is being very cautious because of the fears, you know, that we experience relating with the AGOA, where Nigeria could not make about 2%, you know, impact in benefiting from that. Well, we'd like to thank you very specially for being part of this very conversation that focused on ECOWAS-EU Economic Partnership Agreement with the ECOWAS nations. I think this has been well discussed. We thank all of you gentlemen for being part of this very conversation. Thank you. Blessing?
Yes, to sport now, part of our complimentary segment.
After the group